30 million people, over 100 nations, one coffin, and every single one of them is a message aimed straight at Washington. Let me explain. Right now, the streets of Tehran are filled with the largest funeral in the modern history of the Middle East. And the numbers are almost hard to hold in your head. More than 30 million mourners. Formal delegations from over 100 countries. Triple the crowd that came out in 1989 for Khamenei, the man who founded the whole Islamic Republic. And when you see footage like that, the instinct is to file it under one word: grief. A nation mourning its slain leader. Okay, hold that instinct, because grief is the surface, and we are not here for the surface. Here's what I want you to see instead. That funeral is not a funeral. It's a scoreboard. And the number on that scoreboard is the final grade on a strategy the United States has been running patiently, expensively for 46 years. A strategy that just very publicly failed its exam in front of the entire world. You just have to know what the exam was measuring. So let me take you back, because you cannot read this moment without the pattern that produced it. Since the revolution of 1979, the United States has treated Iran as a problem to be quarantined. Not defeated on a battlefield, quarantined. Locked outside the normal circuits of the international system. And the tools were always the same. Comprehensive sanctions to choke off the oil money. Secondary sanctions to scare away anyone who might trade with them anyway. Diplomatic isolation to keep them off the guest lists that matter. And every so often, a carrier group parked offshore just to remind everyone who was boss. And the bet underneath all of it was simple. Deny Iran two things: economic oxygen and diplomatic recognition, and the country shrinks. Its influence withers, its nuclear program becomes too expensive to sustain, and eventually, starved and alone, it either collapses or it comes crawling to the table on American terms. Here's the thing you need to understand, though. This wasn't stupid. This is one of the oldest moves in the entire playbook of great powers. When a hegemon faces a large, motivated, ideologically coherent adversary, a country with a real population, a real territory, a real belief system, it almost never wants to invade. Invasion is a nightmare. Ask the ghost of every empire that ever marched into a place full of people who did not want them there. It's expensive, it's bloody, and the results are never guaranteed. So the smart move, the cheap move, is strangulation. Cut off the capital, the markets, the recognition, and let the target rot from the inside while you barely lift a finger. That's the strategy. Isolation as a weapon. Loneliness as a siege. And for a long time, it looked like it was working. So now, look again at those 30 million people and ask the only question that matters. If the siege was working, where did all these people come from? Because this is the part the strategy cannot survive. A country that is truly isolated cannot do what Iran just did. It cannot summon representatives from over 100 nations to stand on its soil at its most vulnerable moment. The death of its leader, the transition of its power, the exact instant when a quarantined state is supposed to look weakest. Saudi Arabia sent people, Qatar sent people, Oman sent people, and Pakistan didn't just send a delegation, it sent a high-level one, and appears to have quietly helped coordinate the whole thing behind the curtain. Now, was everyone there? No. And that absence tells its own story. Kuwait stayed away. Bahrain stayed away. The United Arab Emirates stayed away. So even among the Gulf states, the ones sitting closest to Iran, the ones with the most to lose, the calculation has split. There is no longer one Gulf answer to the question, do we deal with Tehran? There are now several. And that fracture, that crack in what used to be a solid wall, is itself the signal. Because in international politics, the ability to host a gathering like this, at your weakest hour, without it being disrupted, without the room staying empty, that is a form of legitimacy. And legitimacy is the one thing sanctions cannot touch. You can freeze a bank account. You can blacklist a tanker. You cannot sanction 100 flags standing in a room choosing to be there. That's a currency your embargo does not accept. Does that make sense? The funeral isn't the mourning. The funeral is the receipt. Proof of purchase. On a legitimacy Washington spent 46 years trying to make unbuyable. And here is where it gets strange. Because at the exact same moment Iran is filling that room, watch what the United States is doing. It's leaving. The B-52 bombers that were forward-based in the United Kingdom, flown home. The F-15 squadrons that were sitting in Jordan, right on Iran's doorstep, heading back to the United States. The crisis action teams, the round-the-clock cells that run the war planning during a real confrontation, dialed back down to normal working hours. Not surged, not reinforced, reduced. Stop and feel the timing of that. Iran is staging the largest demonstration of diplomatic reach in its history, and America is quietly walking its hardware off the board. Why? Why now of all moments? Part of the answer is boring, and the boring answers are usually the true ones. Midterm elections are coming, and a politician who opens a giant new military commitment right before an election is a politician playing with fire. Voters are tired. The appetite for another open-ended entanglement in the Middle East is thin, and sustained high-tempo operations burn through resources, fuel, munitions, money, attention, that a leader might very much want to keep in reserve for a fight that actually matters to him. So what you're watching is a visible descent down the escalation ladder. And I want to be precise because this is the heart of it. Going down the ladder does not mean the competition is over. It doesn't mean America surrendered. It means America just recalculated the price it's currently willing to pay in this one arena and decided the price was too high this month for this fight. But strategy doesn't care about your intentions. It cares about your position. And when you step back from the board while your rival is filling the room, the two moves combine into a single, unmistakable picture. The enforcer is easing off, and everyone watching just saw it happen. And Israel is reading that exact same picture, and Israel is nervous. Netanyahu is set to sit down with Trump for the ritual we've all seen 100 times. Public pledges of eternal friendship on the podium, private requests in the room. And the shopping list is predictable. Renewed American military commitment, pointed at Iran. Continued political cover for operations in southern Lebanon and Gaza. And a quiet tolerance for settlement expansion in the West Bank. But look at what Israel has already given up, because that's where the truth lives. Israel walked back its own earlier demand to completely disarm Hamas through a deep ground campaign. Walked it back. And the reason isn't mysterious. Large-scale urban warfare against an entrenched, dug-in opponent is a meat grinder. High casualties, long attrition, month after month fighting for streets you already fought for last month. And when the expected cost of a campaign climbs higher than the gain, even the most determined actor blinks. That's not weakness, that's arithmetic. But hold that against the other half of the ledger, because while the decisive urban campaign gets quietly shelved, the slow work continues. Gradual annexation, settlement growth in the West Bank, steady, low-friction consolidation of land already under effective control. And the United States shows almost no inclination to push back. You see the asymmetry? Slow consolidation on land you already hold is cheap. Decisive campaigns in dense cities and mountains are expensive. So the expensive ambition gets trimmed and the cheap one keeps rolling. Not because anyone announced it, because that's simply where the cost curve points. Actors flow toward the low-cost option like water downhill every time. And that brings us to the talks, the one scheduled to pick up after the funeral, with another round on the calendar around July 11th. And I want to manage your expectations, because the headlines are going to try to inflate them. Nothing decisive is going to happen there. Here's why. That June 17th Memorandum of Understanding, the big Hormuz deal that was supposed to reset everything, it's effectively dead already. A piece of paper both sides are still politely holding, but the spirit of it is gone. And you can prove that just by watching the oil. Iranian tankers are moving crude through alternative routes right now, toward Fujairah, then onward to India. The sanctions leak. They always leak. And the paper wall Washington built has holes in it that widen by the week. And even in the best case, even if both sides shook hands on something real, the relief couldn't arrive fast. Unfreezing assets, clearing financial channels, physically shipping oil, that's weeks of logistics, minimum. Meanwhile, the funeral period, running until around July 9th, swallows Iran's entire political attention. And a country burying its leader and staging the largest show of resilience in its history has very little reason to hand over concessions in a back room. Why would it? Its leverage has never been higher. So what actually happens at that table isn't a negotiation. It's a signaling game. Iran uses the funeral to broadcast one message. We are not isolated. We are not collapsing. Look at the room. And the United States uses the drawdown and the careful timing of the talks to broadcast a different one. We still have options. We haven't committed to anything. Don't mistake our step back for a retreat. Two players, each performing for the other, neither one ready to actually pay the full price of what the other is demanding. Let me make the whole thing concrete, because once you see it this way, you can't unsee it. Imagine one player at a table whose entire strategy is a single rule. Nobody else is allowed to deal with a certain target. And this player is powerful, genuinely powerful. He can punish you if you break it, freeze your accounts, block your trade. So for years, everyone obeys. But the target of the rule is not helpless. He has his own sources of value the enforcer cannot simply cancel. Energy, sitting in the ground. Geography, sitting on the world's most important choke point. And the raw social capacity to put 30 million bodies in the street on command in front of every camera on Earth. Now, the enforcer, for his own reasons, starts pulling his guards back from the perimeter. He's tired. He's distracted. He's got an election. His presence thins. What happens to everyone else's math? The moment the enforcer's presence drops, the expected cost of breaking his rule drops right along with it. And so the other players, cautiously, one by one, start testing the boundary. A delegation here, a high-level visit there, a tanker that used to hide, now sailing a little more openly. Each one a small experiment with the same question underneath it. What does it actually cost me now to defy the rule? And the funeral is that experiment, run at maximum scale. 100 nations, all testing the boundary at once, all discovering the same answer. The cost has fallen. The enforcers' coalition is no longer one solid wall, and the target pulled off something remarkable. It took a moment of pure internal vulnerability, the death of its own leader, and converted it into an external demonstration of acceptance. This is the master frame, slow, deliberate. This is the line you want them to remember. And this is the difference between two kinds of power. Lock this in because it's the master key to the whole century. There is dominance and there is control. Dominance is the enforcer's game. It works by sustained, constant, expensive coercion. You keep the pressure on forever, or the whole thing falls apart. And it becomes ruinously expensive the moment your target refuses to collapse, and the moment other partners become available. Control is different. Control shapes the environment so that other players calibrate their own behavior without you standing over them every second. You don't force the outcome. You bend the field, the outcome rolls across. And what this funeral is quietly announcing is that the balance between those two is shifting. The dominant strategy is running out of gas. Because here's the deep historical truth Washington keeps forgetting, generation after generation. When you try to isolate a large, coherent, motivated state, one with real size and a real spine, you very often do not get capitulation. You get the opposite. You get consolidation. Squeeze a country like that and it doesn't curl up and die. It goes looking for new partners. It deepens ties with every other power that's also unhappy with the current order. It uses every public event it can stage to prove it is not a pariah. And slowly, the sanctions regime rots from the edges. Because third parties keep running the same cold calculation. The cost of obeying the embargo is now higher than the cost of quietly defying it. And the day that flips for enough of them, your siege isn't a siege anymore. It's a formality, a thing people nod at politely and then walk around. And if you think this pattern is new, it isn't. It's one of the most reliable lessons in the history of great powers, relearned the hard way every time. Try to strangle a large, proud nation into submission, and you very often forge the exact thing you were trying to prevent. Cutting off Imperial Japan's oil and steel before the Second World War didn't make Japan compliant. It convinced Tokyo its only survival lay in a violent breakout. The decades-long embargo on Cuba, 90 miles from American shores, didn't topple the government. It handed that government a permanent story about a hostile giant and drove it into the arms of a rival superpower. Isolation, aimed at a target with enough size and enough will to endure it, does the enforcer's enemies a favor. It manufactures resolve. It manufactures alliances. It manufactures the exact defiant unity you were trying to dissolve. And we are watching that same flip happen right now. Iran's oil still finds non-American markets. Gulf states show up against American preferences. Pakistan works the back channels. Every one of them, a third party deciding the price of compliance isn't worth paying anymore. And once enough of them decided at once, the wall is already gone. It just takes a funeral for everyone to see it. And now I want you to actually feel the scale of what's on the table. Because we've been talking in the cool language of strategy, and I don't want you to miss the human weight of this. Picture the American strategist, not a cartoon villain, a serious professional in a quiet room who has spent an entire career on the Iran file. 46 years of institutional effort behind him, trillions of dollars routed through the machinery of sanctions, decades of diplomatic arm twisting, keeping Tehran off the guest lists, making sure the phone lines stayed cold. An enormous, patient, monumentally expensive project to make one country alone in the world. And now picture that same strategist turning on the television and seeing the answer to his life's work. 30 million people in the street, 100 flags in the room, the cameras of the entire planet pointed at a nation that's supposed to be a hermit and finding instead a host. At the precise moment of maximum weakness, the death of the leader, when the whole theory said the isolation would finally bite, the room is full, the streets are full, and the message from every one of those bodies is the same, and it is devastating in its simplicity. Your quarantine does not exist. That is the moment the strategy dies. Not in a battle, not with a treaty, on a television screen, watching a room refuse to stay empty. And once you see it that clearly, the real shape of what's coming becomes obvious. Because this was never a story about one funeral. It's a story about a principle. The power to isolate is decaying, and in its place, a messier, more crowded world is being born. One where 100 players make their own calculations, and no single enforcer can keep the room empty by force of will alone. Now let me be fair to American power, because sober analysis demands it. The United States is not finished, not remotely. It still holds staggering material power. It can still surge forces back into this region fast if a genuinely vital interest is threatened. The drawdown is a recalibration, not a collapse. Do not mistake me. The hegemon is not dead, but something has changed, and it's subtle, and it's permanent. The everyday management of the regional order, the routine, automatic ability to decide who is legitimate and who must be shunned, that has become expensive and slow and uncertain. It no longer runs on autopilot. Every act of enforcement now costs more political capital than it used to and delivers less. And so the local powers, Israel, Iran, the Gulf states, and rising connectors like Pakistan, are all being forced to learn a new and uncomfortable skill: how to get what they want with less external underwriting, less American money, less American cover, less American presence standing behind them. So let me give you the tells, the things to actually watch for, so you can see this trend move in real time instead of taking my word for it. Watch the guest list. Not just this funeral, the next summit, the next state visit, the next regional gathering. Watch which countries start showing up in rooms they used to avoid. Every new face at the table is another vote that the isolation is over. Watch the oil routes. Watch Fujairah. Watch the tankers to India. If the flows to non-American markets keep widening, keep getting more open, less hidden, that's the sanctions wall crumbling in public, one shipment at a time. Watch the American basing map. Watch whether those B-52s and F-15s come back to the region, or whether more assets quietly follow them home. A hegemon that keeps thinning its forward presence is a hegemon choosing control over dominance, and telling every local player to start planning for a world with less of it around. And watch the July 11th talks, but watch them for what they fail to produce. If they end, as I expect, in vague language about progress and future rounds, with nothing concrete on enrichment or inspections, that's your confirmation. Iran had no reason to concede, and it didn't. My short-term read is this: over the coming weeks, through the end of the funeral around July 9th, through the July 11th round, into the heat of the midterm season, expect the same shape you've been watching. No single dramatic explosion, a slow tightening of Iran's diplomatic position, and a slow loosening of America's grip. Both happening quietly, both compounding. Iran will bank the legitimacy it just earned and press for more. Israel will scramble to lock in American pledges while the window's still open, sensing correctly that the window is narrowing. And in Washington, a slow, uncomfortable recognition will settle in, that the isolation instrument, the tool they trusted for 2 generations, has lost its edge. No question, no CTA, slow, weighted. The map of the Middle East is being redrawn right now. Not by a war, not by a single decisive battle anyone will remember. It's being redrawn by the accumulation of small signals. A delegation here, a tanker there, a room that filled up when it was supposed to stay empty. And the direction is unmistakable. Toward a region where local actors hold more of their own cards, and where every outside power, the United States very much included, operates on a shorter leash with tighter budgets and thinner patience for staying entangled. That is the map now being drawn. 30 million signatures on it, written in the streets of Tehran. Deliver it almost as a private, uneasy afterthought, then cut hard. Do not resolve it. And there's one thread I've left hanging on purpose, because it's the part nobody can answer yet, and it's the part that should unsettle you most. Iran didn't just bury a leader this week. It transferred its supreme power. And the man who now holds the single most consequential office in the Islamic Republic, Khamenei's own son, has not been seen in public since he took it. Not once. He rules from total silence, from behind a wall of security, invisible to the entire world that's busy watching the crowds. So the real question was never what those 30 million people in the street are saying. It's what the one man we cannot see is building while they say it.